Welcome to Talking Feds, a roundtable that brings together prominent former federal officials and special guests for a dynamic discussion of the most important political and legal topics of the day. I'm Harry Littman. This week, the scandal is on the other foot, so to speak. Donald Trump found himself in ever deeper and hotter water as large sectors of his base were up in arms over the failure to release the files on Jeffrey Epstein as AG Pam Bondi had promised. The scandal reached a fever pitch at the end of the week when the Wall Street Journal ran an article about Trump and Epstein featuring a vulgar birthday note from Trump. Rather than attempting to deflect or explain it, Trump chose his reflexive strategy of insisting the notebook was fake, which seemed to put him on a dangerous collision course with his own core constituency. Elsewhere, one of Trump's most staunch sycophants, Emil Bove, seemed poised to be confirmed to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, notwithstanding an abominable record of contempt for the Constitution, the rule of law, and the norms of the Department of Justice. Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee voted unanimously to advance his nomination to the Senate floor, while the Democrats on the committee walked out of the vote in protest. The MAGA crusade against civil society and institutions is not limited to having dangerous political operatives on the federal judiciary. On Thursday, Congress approved a bill that realizes a long-standing objective of conservative politicians and Project 2025, the defunding of NPR, PBS, and their respective member stations nationwide. While dwarfed in import by Trump's many offenses to the Constitution, the evisceration of NPR and PBS threatens to aggravate the problems of the absence of reliable reporting and the division of Americans into their own silos of news coverage that are among the legacies of Trump's rule. To help us break down these MAGA breakdowns and fixations, we welcome three of the most accomplished and insightful journalists in the country. And they are David French, an opinion columnist with the New York Times, a former JAG officer deployed to Iraq in 2007, where he earned a Bronze Star. Since transitioning from full-time law practice to join National Review in 2015, he's been a prominent voice in American politics, addressing growing polarization, including through his book, Divided We Fall, America's Secession Threat and How to Restore Our Nation. David, thank you for your service, and thank you, as always, for joining Talking Feds.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to be here.
Tara Setmeyer, the co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. Tara formerly was a CNN political commentator, ABC contributor, and Republican communications director on Capitol Hill, along with David. She's going to help us translate what the hell is going on in MAGA land. Today, she regularly appears as an on-air commentator on MSNBC and various other news outlets. She's also a resident scholar at the UVA Center for Politics. Welcome back, Tara. Always a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.
And Ali Vitali, the host of MSNBC's Way Too Early. She gets up at 2 a.m. or so to give us the news and commentary, which airs weekdays at 5 a.m. Eastern. Previously, Ali covered Capitol Hill for NBC News for nearly a decade, and her first book is Electable: Why America Hasn't Put a Woman in the White House Yet. Ali, thanks as always for joining.
Was waiting for that last word. We need a little bit of hope these days. ... ellipses. All right, so... The pause was good.
Thank you. The most serious scandal of the second Trump administration is now raging, seemingly redoubling every day. David, I wanted to start with you, and I'm really grateful you're here today. It seems to be the case every time you're here. But you wrote in the Times, most Americans saw this news, if they saw it at all, and barely raised an eyebrow. The Epstein story was part of the past. He died in 2019. But it detonated like a bomb in the MAGA universe. Pro-Trump influencers with vast audiences couldn't believe what they were reading. So I want to confess, I was in the camp of most Americans until the tsunami began to build in recent days. Why exactly did this detonate like a bomb in the MAGA universe?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to really answer it, you have to understand there's sort of two Epstein stories. We'll call one of them Little Epstein story, and we'll call the other one Big Epstein story.
Is that like Little Elvis?
Little Elvis, Big Elvis. Little Epstein, Big Epstein. Okay. So Little Epstein is, I use the word little only because you'll see it in contrast to the other one. The Little Epstein story is the story we all know. It's terrible. A man and his associate groom and abuse what appears to be hundreds and hundreds of young women, including girls as well, underage girls. One of the most well-connected people in American life. All kinds of famous people have been in his orbit, been on his plane, been at his parties, including notably Donald Trump. And there were a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, what exactly was the relationship that a lot of these celebrities had with Epstein? Were they involved in any way with any of the sex abuse? How did he die? How would one of the most watched prisoners in America die by suicide? Like, there were legitimate questions to ask. But it's serious and it's bad, but that's Little Epstein. The reason it blew up is because a lot of MAGA believes what you will call Big Epstein story. And the Big Epstein story is that Epstein is sort of the key that unlocks the global pedophile cabal that is running the United States, running our government, running our economy, running the world, globalist pedophile cabal. And that hidden in those files was sort of the laundry list of all of the worst people in the world, with names, dates, perhaps even pictures of the most grotesque misconduct. I've called this sort of like thinking man's QAnon, because whereas QAnon was rooted in just nothing, I mean, it was rooted in a guy who, anonymous person, claims security clearance and claims to have all this information that never really pans out. This was rooted in an actual real case involving an actual horrible human being. But then they just took it and ran with it. It's hard to overstate how much this was part of the MAGA zeitgeist. I mean, Patel, Bongino, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump Jr., all kinds of folks are running around in the 2024 election cycle promising the base that they were going to unleash the hounds, so to speak, of the Epstein investigation, and that when they did, it would bring everything crumbling down. And this got to why a lot of people support Trump in the first place. They believe he is the instrument of vengeance against this global pedophile regime. And if you think there is a global pedophile regime, well, then a lot of objections to Donald Trump are like minor stuff. I mean, I'm trying to take down a global pedophile regime and you're worried about a hush money case. I mean, that would be kind of the way that they would think it through, to the extent they're even aware of the hush money case. But this was so foundational to sort of part of the MAGA base's view of the world. And then when the memo comes in and it tries to blow up the whole thing, they were not having it.
The DOJ memo saying, oops, we told you we'd have something, but as it turns out, no list, the dog ate it, whatever. Ali, you seemed like you wanted to, well, let me actually serve this up to you, because on your show, you had exactly the sorts of folks that David's talking about. You have Megyn Kelly and Laura Ingraham and Steve Bannon. They didn't rev up the base. They just said, who believes this, who doesn't? And people were screaming on their own. And the number one thing here to me is, as David says, after scandal since January with trashing the Constitution, etc., Trump's MO has always been, I'll weather that as long as my base stays with me. This really seems to be something that runs deeper in big cohorts, at least, of MAGA than Donald Trump himself, and they're ready to throw him to the wolves. What do you make of this?
They're ready to throw him to the wolves until they're not, right? I mean, like, this is the most outward that we've seen people who are typically so willing to go along with him be able to say, no, I actually need more from you on this, right? He was able to, at a certain point, quell Charlie Kirk into not talking about it until Charlie Kirk came back and was basically one of the people pleading with the president, my God, please don't make me have to keep turning around and explaining this lack of transparency to the very people that came to me because of my proximity to you. And so I think there is so much frustration within here, but I actually think that the reason this is sticking so much is because it's the foundation of the wave that Trump was able to leverage in the first place, right? This mistrust in government that existed long before Trump and will continue to exist after him. That mistrust was only deepened by Trump fomenting conspiracy theories, much like this one, that made people believe in this global cabal that David is talking about here. And so Trump was supposed to be the person that came in and equalized the playing field for the everyman, who pulled the veil off of all the things that the government was hiding from them. And it turns out when you're the government and you get in there and you see what reality actually is, the government's actually not doing any of this stuff.
We've met the enemy and they are us.
Correct. And then you have to grapple with that, right? So you're looking at the consequences of their own actions. And I also think the financial piece of this is interwoven and important to talk about, right? Because MAGA became an ecosystem unto itself that has a lot of money running through it. When you're a podcaster like Dan Bongino, it's okay to traffic in what the algorithm wants to feed you. But when you are inside the government, and I remember watching him, as I think all of us did, when he was on Fox News, really seeming physically racked with the weight of the facts that he has since found out as deputy FBI director, trying to reconcile the fact that they talked about there's an Epstein client list and Bondi goes on Fox and says it's sitting on my desk. And I think that's just one tiny piece of this larger puzzle that they have to figure out. Okay, we sold non-fact and outright fiction for so long that how do we now put Pandora back in the box? And you can't.
Theyre, I mean, it's not only the MAGA faithful, even famous ones that we know. It's members of Congress. It's the Speaker of the House who seem to be trying to distance themselves from Trump here or call for the release of this notebook, which we'll get to in a moment. What does that tell you about MAGA, not Trump, but MAGA's overall pool in the party or at least in Congress? What do they fear more even than they fear Donald Trump?
Losing re-election.
Yeah.
I mean, their base, they know. Even Steve Bannon admitted to this. If only a couple percentage points of the MAGA base stay home, that Democrats could potentially win 40 seats in the House. So in their minds, for people like Mike Johnson, the speaker, they don't want to lose power. This is the pinnacle of their careers. And power is intoxicating and corrupting, unfortunately, in a lot of instances. So they're trying to thread the needle where they're hoping their careers outlast Donald Trump, who at this point, is a half a cheeseburger away from potentially meeting his maker at any point. So what happens then? And so they have to think they're playing the long game here. So they're trying to figure out ways to manipulate the news cycle and placate their base to make it look like they're doing something like, we hear you, we're with you, we're outreached also. But then also they can't upset dear leader because then he could make their lives difficult. And we've watched this pattern happen over and over and over again on a multitude of issues over the last 10 years with Donald Trump and the Republican Party, which is why the party is, the rot from inside the party is so great that it's destroyed any Republican Party that I was ever a part of. It's why I left it. But what's interesting about all of this that's different than other controversies, I think, that Donald Trump has faced is that this is the first time where his BS hasn't been able to extinguish the firestorm. We're now going on over a week and it's only gotten worse. 2, he's changed his story multiple times in nonsensical ways, in provable ways that even his own base is going like, what? Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Because of all the things that Allie and David just mentioned, like, our own people said that they had the files. The client list was on the desk on our own channels, the channels that we listen to and trust. So wait, it's not making sense. The math's not mathing here. So it's difficult for them to reconcile because if they believe what Trump said, then that means that somebody was lying then, or are they lying now? It gets hard. The cognitive dissonance here is on overdrive for the MAGA base. And the other part about this, too, that's different than I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but has Donald Trump ever insulted his supporters as openly and deliberately and defiantly as he did this week, as the more and more he got pissed off that nobody was listening to him and making it go away? I don't think I've ever seen that not publicly anyway. We all know that how he really feels about his supporters in private. For him to call them stupid and weaklings and saying, I don't need your support anymore, and that weird, thank you for your attention to this matter.
I guess
I don't get
that's
that.
true.
I mean, technically, I guess that's a good admission that he's not going to try and like stay in office in 2028, but it's still early. I'm just saying, like, all of these things, like all of these dynamics make for a very fascinating news cycle every single day. And the response that Donald Trump is having to this is only making it worse. And the damage control that some of his acolytes are trying to engage in now to try to flip this somehow to become the Democrats' fault. Like, this is the Democrats that are doing this. It's crazy, right? Comey and Obama, and then it's the Democrats that are keeping this alive when no, actually it was like Byron Donald's own bill that wanted to release them. That's one of your guys, and it's your guys. It's the Republicans who are calling for this. So you can't blame this one on Democrats. So it's quite a mess for Donald Trump, and I'm not quite sure how it ends.
You're right, he's bobbed and weaved, but I think he's really completely staked out the position for MAGA anyway, that this Wall Street Journal piece, which we're going to get to a moment, is 100% fake. And if it turns out not to be, he is in a pickle. I just want to double back to you, Ali and David, because when Ali started out of the box and said they're against him until they're not, you gave a pretty emphatic nod. So what are you thinking there in terms of the medium range consequences for Trump of this breach between him and his normally very loyal base?
That's a great question. I would say one of the things about this is the first time that Trump has lied to MAGA. Let me put it this way. Trump has lied to MAGA a lot, but always when Trump has lied to MAGA, he's told them what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is the first time he's lied to MAGA with something they don't want to hear. Right. And this is something that they're eager to believe that the election was stolen. They're eager to believe that there should never have been a Russian investigation. Those are things they want to believe. They're eager to believe is a perfect phone call with Zelensky. But they have been told by MAGA, that there is a list here and that this list will blow things up. I mean, you can go back and, look at the tail of the tape. It says everything. Now, this is where the cognitive dissonances come in, and this is going to sound strange, and I don't know if you guys are seeing this as well. I'm very curious if you're seeing this as well. In a weird way, as horrible as that Wall Street Journal report has been, it's kind of been a gift to Trump in this sense. It came from the mainstream media, and so he can immediately, regardless of the veracity of it, rally and say, they're coming for me again. And so you've even seen some voices like Megyn Kelly, who'd been previously holding his feet to the fire, calling it BS and calling out the Wall Street Journal. And so...
But David, you forgot one important part here. The Wall Street Journal is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News. So there's always been that distrust between Donald Trump and Rupert, even though Rupert Murdoch and Fox have been basically made Donald Trump. But there has always been that little tension there because the Murdochs don't really like Donald Trump, and every opportunity they have, they try. If they think, oh, this is it, they'll try a little bit to go against him, and then they end up having to snap back because Donald Trump will threaten them and they lose their audience. So this is an interesting, other piece of this that people need to know. Yeah. And, Megyn Kelly also sued Fox and, so there's some history there too. So just a little added context to that.
What a hornet's nest.
If you look at the Donald Trump Fox Murdoch relationship status on Facebook, I don't think they still have that anymore, but it would say it's complicated. Yes. Because they have carried his water massively before. And as you're saying, they have not. And so I have seen them use the fact that this came through the Wall Street Journal, came through Rupert Murdoch to discredit it. Now, that's a very perilous position to take right now, but that's where they are.
Trump cost them a lot of money, too. Let's not forget, $787 million because of the election case with Dominion. And now there's still the $1 billion case with Smartmatic that is pending, all about the election lies. And, Fox News is still going through this. So this complicates some things for them for that, too.
We were talking about this on my show. Like, imagine saying to someone 10 years ago, yeah, a Republican president is suing Rupert Murdoch.
Right.
Like, what?
I want to make a few lawyers' points, and let me just make them because I think I have them in my experience. We don't have to discuss them, but take it from me first. This gambit of trying to go to the grand jury files that Comey, who was fired, might have had is totally bogus in the sense that there's nothing about them which she assembled in order to prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell, and only for that. And there's a lot left, and you want to keep them for her own possibility of retrying. And in the unlikely event Maxwell wins on appeal. But this is not the mother lode that MAGA is looking for. And I think it's just going to be a loser, even if things come out. Oh, and by the way, that the court may not even permit it. It's the classic Trump position where they have to come in and say, for political reasons, could you violate grand jury, please? I mean, the absolute orthodox thing to do is keep it sealed. Second, no friggin' way Wall Street Journal backs down or pulls an ABC or CBS. They are all in on this, and it's going to be seriously, if he sues them, which would be, I think, a really stupid move on his part. He just gets deeper and deeper in the quicksand. And I just want to say, because I don't know where else to say it, but Comey, who was fired, she says in her departing letter, she makes it so clear what people inside the department feel about this regime. Fear, she writes, is the tool of a tyrant, wielded to suppress independent thought. Let this moment fuel the fire that already burns at the heart of this place, SDNY and DOJ, a fire of righteous indignation at abuses of power. We know what that means. Of commitment to seek justice for victims. We know what that means. It's pointing out that all the ransacking of DOJ ultimately hurts us and victims of crime, and of dedication to truth above all else. And we sure as hell know what that means. So,
good for her.
This is going to go in the canon of resignation letters.
Harry, I have a legal question for you, just for people who are curious.
I do, after all, have a JD.
Yes. And we just play lawyers on TV, and you're real. So there's been some question about, and I'm looking at this through the political lens as well, when Donald Trump put that another hysterical tweet out, because he's been, or truthing or whatever it's called now, but he's been very busy, very active on Truth Social with, very emphatic statements and more hysterical, in my opinion, as the days have gone on that platform. But last night, he said that he was basically calling for any pertinent information to be released by grand jury testimony, to be released by the courts and all of that. And from what I understand is that it seems to me like, that was a very lawyered statement, because there's a lot of pitfalls in there.
He doesn't put in pertinent on his own.
No, I don't think he knows what pertinent means. And so, pertinent to who or by whom, how is that determined? If it has to go before a judge, which that's my understanding, right? That grand jury,
that's right.
Unsealing that
material.
Basically, because it's by nature supposed to be secret. So a judge has to determine whether they're going to do that. Testimony is different than material, right? So that's just actual testimony. That's like, there are other things that are that could be grand jury materials that don't have to go before a judge. So there's a difference so it's even more narrow in scope what he's asking for. And then the other part is if a judge says no, because they look at the rule, right? Was it Rule 6E or something like that?
You're good. Well, you are good.
I should have gone to law school. I should have gone to law school. It's one of my biggest regrets in life, actually.
We all have in the last few years, haven't we?
Yeah. But I'm saying, like, under that rule, there's very specific exemptions for what the judge would look at, whether it applies. And like the public's right to know, or that the president's throwing a temper tantrum, that's not in the exceptions.
Or putting out a political firestorm is not there, right? Which they hope, right? They hope that the judge will refuse. So
because then they can use the judge as the
number
foil.
one point to make about the grand jury material, it's got nothing to do with what MAGA wants.
Right.
So that's the big thing.
Because Pam Bondi, because she could release, like, I think the other thing too is that difference here and what they put.
It was on her desk.
Right.
Then the dog ate it. Right.
But all those grand jury materials, which could be all kinds of things, I don't know, flight logs, it could be receipts, it could be bank statements, whatever, she could release right now. She has the power to do that. Right? It's like the evidence part.
If it's under a grand jury seal, you need a judge's order.
So there's no difference between testimony versus material?
If it's within the grand jury seal, that's correct.
Okay.
And also, when you're talking about a grand jury here, this is a grand jury that was looking into Jeffrey Epstein's wrongdoing.
That's right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. This was not a grand jury that was impaneled to look at all things, all people, all individuals who touched upon Jeffrey Epstein. They were launching a prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. And so this is kind of Trump's sleight of hand. He's saying, I want to release something that he doesn't have the sole power to release, number one. And number two, that isn't actually what MAGA is looking for.
And that's
the key.
That's the lawyer's 100% point. Okay, so let's go to what they're looking for. Let me ask you, this is a legal point, but it's really a political one. This reminds me a little of, remember the Signal story where Jeffrey Goldberg is on and the administration pushes back, and it was just made it sort of inevitable we were going to see that transcript. It just feels to me, but this is a political question more than legal, but that there's this hydraulic force, and one way or another, that notebook is coming out, and probably sooner than later. Do you guys agree?
Absolutely. Wall Street Journal never would have published that story unless they were prepared to take it to the next step. I mean,
right.
It is the Wall Street Journal, regardless of who owns it. They are a reputable newspaper and with journalistic standards. And so this isn't the National Enquirer. It's not the New York Post.
Right.
It is the Wall Street Journal.
And it's the news side of the
Correct,
journal,
not
right?
the opinion side. So, and even then. So I suspect that there is a drip, drip, drip that is going to become a much more formidable story after that. On top of the Senator Ron Wyden stuff. I mean, we saw that too.
The money stuff, yeah.
With the banking, treasury stuff.
The Widen stuff to me feels like the thing that is the most like you can almost hold it in your hands. And it's also the thing that's gone the most under the radar because it's almost boring to hear about suspicious activity reports from banks. Yeah. But Widen is actually, there are Republicans who, in some fairness, are like, well, where have Democrats been on this? But for Ron Wyden, he has actually, over the course of the last several years, been trying to do a literal follow the money trail. And he's been looking at thousands of whether it was wire transfers or other financial blueprints, basically related to Epstein and the people who were paying him. And so for Wyden, who got access to these records, I think in the last year of the Biden administration, he's now coming back. And I think he quietly this week on the Hill was like, hey, by the way, we actually know where the threads for a client list could come from, whether or not this is written somewhere already or not. We could just write it on down if we look more into these records. And so when you talk about the tangible things that could actually come out, yes, the journal reporting is obviously a salacious new piece of this puzzle, but the Widen banking stuff, I think, is one of the most tangible pieces. And then the other way that Congress, and this is a long shot, which is why I underscore the Widen piece first, but they're trying to do what would be a bipartisan discharge petition that would basically compel Republican leadership, and it probably wouldn't happen before September because of how long everything has to age, but it would compel Republican leadership to bring to the floor some kind of bill that compels the Justice Department to release and be transparent on the Jeffrey Epstein case files. Now, they made another separate move on this so-called non-binding resolution late overnight before everyone left town this week. That's also something that you're probably not going to see hit the floor immediately. But I think the important thing to remember, if you only remember one thing about what Congress is doing on the Epstein files, is they actually have the votes to actually get stuff released here. But Johnson is squeezed right now because as much as he's talking about, we need transparency, why can't they explain this? He's not actually saying it that way. He's trying to be very diplomatic about it. And being diplomatic means not bringing this to the floor because Trump does not want it brought to the floor. And so that's sort of the reality check on Congress, is there's those two threads, I think, are the most tangible outcome things.
Yet, but he's moving incrementally, right? And unless and until the notebook comes out. And when it does, by the way, we're going to see a signature. It's going to sure look like Donald Trump's signature. It's somehow a simulacrum of pubic hair in a way we don't, that the Wall Street Journal had. But it's going to be gross. And his only defense then is going to be, this is, who you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
Well, listen, the defense that's coming out from him is from someone, right? He said, it's not me. I don't draw.
Right.
And that's not my language. I seem to remember that this is the same guy who bragged about grabbing women by their private parts on a hot mic. He didn't deny that he said that because it's on a hot mic. We all heard it.
Right.
So we know, and we were told that was, quote, locker room talk.
Could have gone that way now, but it's
That's
now
right,
too
but
late
he
for
didn't.
him, right?
He didn't because it's just, he's in full Roy Cohn, deny mode. But we also know, because I think it was the Washington Post or someone that showed this doodle that he did of the New York skyline that was auctioned off for $30,000. There was a news story about it. So he does, in fact, draw. So this whole thing, again, by him denying this, it's just digging himself in further. He could have just said, hey, that's, it was locker room talk, but he can't do that because he's been trying to also coffee boy his relationship with Epstein, saying, I don't know, that he's a creep. I didn't really know him like that. When we all know it is well documented that they were very close best buds for over a decade. Epstein said so. Trump said he knew him for 15 years. Trump said that they like beautiful women. He likes them as much as I do, except he likes them on the younger side. I mean,
you said that in a 2002 quote.
Correct. So like he's not, it's like he doesn't live in the same reality that the rest of us do. And he forgets that everything lives forever on the internet. And so it's very easy to go back and just dismantle all of his BS excuses for this, which is why this situation continues to get worse.
That's true, but he's made it worse. He could say, look, in 2004, they did have a falling out. If he wanted to just say, this has basically been the Dershowitz line, I think the Clinton line, I got nothing to do with this creep anymore. The classic Washington maxim here in this situation is get everything out and get it out immediately. Nothing could less describe Donald Trump. Lie about everything and lie immediately and weather the storm. But if we're right, and I saw 3 nods that it's coming out, there's a bad day of reckoning. All right, so it's not going away, as everyone said. I wanted to end, actually, back with you, Dave, because you made this really provocative point in your really good New York Times piece. My first thought was, where's David French on this? That the episode allows us to peer into the future of MAGA and see its potential crack up after Trump is gone. The movement could tear itself apart. Can you explain what you're saying there?
Yeah. So if you want to know the difference between Trump 2016 coalition and Trump 2024 coalition, Trump 2016 was, vast majority normie Republicans voting against Hillary Clinton. There were a lot of warnings about Trump, but we'd not experienced him. We had not experienced him as a president. Trump 2024, he did something really interesting. Imagine that you took every super disgruntled coalition in America, from sort of the center left all the way to the far right. And whether you're anti-vaccine or whether you're isolationist or whether you think there's a global pedophile conspiracy, all of the super disgruntled people, and said, you've got a home here under one condition: you bend the knee to me. Doesn't matter what you believe. Pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, pro-choice, pro-life, whatever it is, pro-Ukraine, anti-Ukraine, you can be in this coalition. And what you ended up with is he brought a bag of scorpions into the GOP. And after the head scorpion is gone, they're going to fall in on each other. And you actually already see it. You saw it in the run-up to the Iran strikes. You had the isolationist wing, really going at it with the more conventional Republican wing. You see it now in just all over the place. You've got Megyn Kelly wearing out Ben Shapiro on her show. You've got Tucker Carlson rebelling. You have Charlie Kirk first expressing concern, then saying trust the government. Then you have Alex Jones virtually crying. You have all of these figures just sort of all over the place. A Candace Owens putting their feet to the fire. Other members of Congress coming on to support Trump. You can see the jockeying for position in real time, because it has already dawned on some people. It's going to keep dawning on some people that actually Donald Trump's not eligible to run in 2028. He's a lame duck. And we know from all of American history that it is not too soon to start thinking about a successor, even in the first year of a president's second term. And so this is linked to that. This argument, this public fight, is absolutely linked to who is going to be the true MAGA standard bearer going forward.
You know who's been suspiciously quiet? Is J.D. Vance.
Except he said, let's let this notebook out.
That's about it. But he hasn't really been the attack dog, standing in the breach for Trump that a vice president would normally be in a situation when the head honcho is in trouble. He's very delicately approaching this. And I think we should pay attention because he obviously thinks he should be the heir apparent. And I think that there are very powerful, moneyed people, particularly the tech bro contingent, the Peter Thiel PayPal mafia guys that are grooming J.D. Vance to be the successor with their own nefarious plans for what this country should look like. I think you're looking at different factions within MAGA beginning to jockey for position, to David's point, for the future here, because it is coming. And so I think we should just pay attention to how those people react.
All right, it is now time for a spirited debate brought to you by our sponsor, Total Wine and More. Each episode, you'll be hearing an expert talk about the pros and cons of a particular issue in the world of wine, spirit, and beverages.
Thank you, Harry. In today's spirited debate, we uncork the notion of drinking bottled wine versus canned wine. Yeah, wine in a can. Wine connoisseurs may stay true to the bottle, but wine connoisseurs have adopted the untraditional packaging for its added convenience, ideal for picnics, concerts, and outdoor events, really anywhere corkscrews are scarce. And since aluminum cools faster than glass, it reduces the time it takes to chill your favorite Sauvignon Blanc. But swirling your wine in a glass does help it open up, which gives it a lot more flavor. Of course, you can always transfer your canned wine to a glass, but if you're looking to experience the subtleties of a nice bottle, drinking from a glass adds a lot. There are wines more suited to the bottle, and there are those well suited for the canned life. Crisp and sparkling whites and rosés in particular tend to fare best in cans, but bigger, bolder wines will usually benefit from a nice glass. It would seem both have their place. Still on the fence between bottles or cans? There's always wine in a box.
Thanks to our friends at Total Wine and More for today's A Spirited Debate. Okay, man, it's not going away. We'll be talking about it more. I did want to move to what until Thursday seemed like a huge story to me, which was the reporting out of committee favorably and the apparent glide path to confirmation of Emil Bove, who, I've called the least qualified nominee in a generation and has, to me, just glaring terrible flaws, way more than a normal nominee might. Let's start with the Democrats, who did interesting stuff here anyway, and were not just bovine about it. They walked out trying to play the Epstein card, even with Bove. You had a real confrontation between Booker and Grassley, who, as best I can tell, was just breaking the rules by not respecting a point of order. So let's start here on the political side. Did you notice, or did it seem to you that the Dems were actually trying to make points with it, and any chance of succeeding with such an arcane topic as who becomes a Third Circuit Court of Appeal judge?
I mean, this is why the Judiciary Committee exists, right? When you've got 900 former DOJ lawyers saying you cannot confirm this guy to this position, it technically shouldn't matter what party you're in, but if Democrats were to take a stand,
%, pardon me.
I mean, no, of course. I mean, I come from a family of lawyers, right? You respect the courts and you respect the rule of law, right? So it feels that animating to me as well, Harry. And in addition to your lengthy resume, of course you'd have that reaction. But look, for Democrats, everyone likes to play this parlor game of like, well, does it translate politically? On this, it actually doesn't matter. Like, the base does want to see them taking a stand. And so watching them walk out of a committee hearing, which is a rare thing to do, watching Booker take that stand against Grassley for not allowing them to continue some point of debate over the topic of Bove's nomination, all of that shows the fight. So there's your politics piece. But if ever there were an arcane issue or something that's siloed in the realm of like very DC, this would be the thing to take the stand on. And I think it actually fits this larger umbrella theme that I saw out of Congress this week, which was the erosion of bipartisan norms and the decorum that building functions on. Because technically, Congress shouldn't and doesn't really work unless it's acting in bipartisan fashion. And on everything from the Bove nomination to the rescissions package that clawed back $9 billion in partisan fashion, all of that just underscores the way that bipartisanship is crumbling and falling by the wayside. And you've got top Trump administration officials, including Russ Vought over at OMB, saying that's exactly how we want it when it comes to appropriations and funding. And that has such trickle effects through the way that government works or doesn't here. So I think the Bove nomination from a legal perspective is as massive a story as you say it is. But when you put it in the congressional realm, it tells a larger story about the way that Congress is just kind of faltering at this really pivotal moment, because the way that it was set up to function was A, to be bipartisan, and B, to respect these not cemented in rule of law, but like just decorum and etiquette items of the way that it was supposed to function. When people start defaulting on those, there we go.
All 100% true, but I will add the small constitutional point of advice and consent at all in the first place, which they were totally abdicating. But I 100% agree. I mean, it feels like if they're a non-entity here, when would they ever speak up? Tara, you seemed ready to...
Yeah, listen, Emil Bove is one of the worst possible candidates to be a federal judge. These are lifetime appointments. These appointments are supposed to be for serious people who, for the most basic qualification, respect the rule of law and the Constitution. This administration, at every turn, has completely trampled over constitutional norms and rule of law. And particularly when it comes to the judiciary, they have been incredibly disrespectful to all of those things. And Emil Bove was the guy at the DOJ that basically told the subordinates there during the lack of due process and the potentially illegal deportation flights, F you. Tell the judges, F you, we're going to do what we want. Once they're out of the country, doesn't matter anyway. Basically telling them to violate the law and ask for, forgiveness later.
Or not.
Right, or not. I mean, he has a reputation that goes back to when he was a U.S. attorney in the Southern District of being someone who was bellicose and who was disrespectful of subordinates and would push boundaries and was formally reprimanded. I mean, they did a formal inquiry into his conduct when he was in the U.S. attorney's office, and it was recommended
by his subordinates.
Correct.
Who, took the gutsy step of writing.
Correct. Yeah. And it was recommended that he be fired. He should be fired back then. So all of these things are glaring examples of why he's so unfit, and not only unfit, but dangerous in a lifetime appointment. People need to understand. We've only had how many judges ever impeached in history? Maybe like 2 or 3, and it's usually for financial misconduct or corruption or something like that, or they committed a crime directly and they were impeached. So once you are there, it's virtually impossible to leave unless you die or resign. So I cannot believe that Republicans, they've already multiple times made themselves into hypocrites by claiming they're all about the rule of law and all of this. After January 6th, they have no credibility whatsoever on that issue, in my opinion, ever again. They don't back the blue, they don't back law enforcement, and they don't respect the rule of law, all the Constitution. Now this guy, Pam Bondi's another one, confirming her. Kash Patel, for God's sakes, confirming him. And now this. I don't know what it's going to take for Republican senators to finally say enough and grow a spine, because they are dismantling our constitutional order by acquiescing to everything Donald Trump wants. Their role is to advise and consent, and if they think it's wrong for the country, they should be saying emphatically no, and this is why, and damn the consequences. Sometimes there's a life after being in Congress, and these senators and need to realize that sometimes there are causes bigger than yourself in your office if you want to see America survive. And this is another one of those cases. They have a chance to stop it, and they should. He should be nowhere near anybody's federal bench ever.
I just couldn't agree more. And I just want to say, we've seen controversial nominations before. Somebody wrote a memo, and did he really mean it? And what's it say about his current qualifications? Somebody had some peccadillo or worse. What does it say about his current qualifications? This is a guy who a few weeks ago has given the middle finger to the courts and lied about it, by the way, misled the Senate. Let me just make another lawyer's point. Boasberg is still considering whether to hold DOJ in contempt. Bove is all over that, and he'll take what evidence he wants to, etc. It is right now on a sort of bizarre freeze from a Court of Appeals panel that has 2 out of 3 Trump nominees. We'll see what happens there. But compounding the embarrassment, this is a guy who has lived by the maxim, anything Trump wants, Constitution be damned, career people in DOJ be damned. That's what we do.
There's a formal whistleblower complaint right now. Never mind what happened years ago when he was in the SDNY. That's bad enough, but it's current.
And the Adams case, by the way, he clearly, and just within DOJ norms, he clearly took cases.
Eric Adams of New York, that case.
Yeah, that were righteous because the facts and law were there and squelched them, and ones that weren't, like this big environmental, because there were no facts in law. This is where another person resigned and tried to force them through. But what he did, and we're really going to find out, to just, say, well, Donald Trump wants this, so screw the courts. That I can't think of a more sort of crystalline example of somebody who should never, as you say, Theyre, be within a country mile of a court at all. I do think that you are right to focus this back on the Republicans' effort to just make it go away, literally not to have any kind of inquiry. Quite a lot else happened, this week, including another really problematic Supreme Court shadow docket opinion letting Trump just ransack the DOE. But I wanted to take a few minutes. Strikes me as important and maybe historic. That's part of the question. But with the agreement by Congress to defund NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, it's been a sort of hobby horse on the right for a while. They think this is the embodiment of sort of, elite sentiment, and why would the government pay for it? Every developed country has something like PBS and NPR. It costs very little, but it's, kind of a sacrificial lamb for, again, the MAGA crowd. What's your sense? Big deal, little deal?
I'm going to say relatively little deal compared to the frontal attack on the constitutional rights of, say, the major news networks, compared to the frontal attack on the constitutional rights of colleges and universities across the country, compared to the frontal attack on the constitutional rights of the legal profession, sending prisoners for indefinite detention in prisons overseas that are so inhumane that if they were in the United States, they'd be an Eighth Amendment violation. This was an act of Congress defunding a publicly funded agency. It was even done procedurally the right way. I mean,
that's right.
I would have had a lot bigger problem with this if Trump administration had just struck it out.
They tried. They tried with the executive order.
I would have had a lot of trouble. I had a lot of trouble with that. But to decide through the appropriations process that we don't want to publicly fund NPR in the scheme of things. I know for media, it feels like a much bigger story because these are our peers in many ways. But compared to all of this, actually, I'm not very troubled by this at all, to be honest. I'm much more troubled by what I'm seeing in private media and how private media, which possesses the full range of First Amendment rights, how much it is being cowed and intimidated and threatened. To me, that is much more important than whether or not we publicly fund some radio stations and TV stations around the country.
Yeah, although just let me say, that is what we're talking about, not just NPR, but especially the Corporation for Public Broadcasting subsidize a lot of really small stations where many of people that we know got their starts, et cetera. Yeah. So it's not simply, all things considered.
Can I just make this? So you're saying like lower stakes when you put it relative to that. I think that's probably right, though I would ratchet it up just a few levels, and here's why. So twofold. The first is directly in relation to these cuts. I had one congressman on my show this week who was saying, hey, I'm in Kentucky. A lot of the local stations that people turn to for emergencies and just to be made aware of things like floods and storms, a lot of that comes through the programs that are funded like this. And so there are concerns at a local level that states are going to have to come up with funding. Stop me if you've heard this song before, because we sing it all the time now. But that states are going to have to come up with extra funding to make sure that these areas, especially in rural states, are funded in a way that they can get emergency alerts. And obviously, against the backdrop of the Texas flooding, that is only a more urgent concern of who gets their news where. And for communities that may not be as wealthy, how do they fund, basic systems? So that's, I think, one piece that is worth chewing over a little bit. The second piece is actually just indirectly related to the rescissions package, because David's right that procedurally they did use like the quote unquote right mechanism for this, but it is the first time that we saw them do a partisan rescissions package in midstream of the fiscal year.
Yep.
And I think that's only important when you forecast it ahead. Because when I saw that the rescissions package passed, all I thought was, okay, your odds for a government shutdown in September just went whoosh, way, way up. And that's because if you're Democrats and you're sitting there saying, all right, typically the process works that Democrats and Republicans sit at a table, they mutually decide to be unhappy with what they get, but everyone decides on the funding levels and what they're going to be and for whom. But then if Republicans can come back midstream through a different mechanism, right, that requires a different threshold of votes, can be done along partisan lines, and they come back in and they strip out everything that Democrats negotiated for themselves in that bill, then it becomes a question for Democrats, and they are openly saying this. Why would we negotiate at all if you're just going to cut us out from under the knees and not give us any chance to be part of this process? And so, again, when you think about the larger umbrella of the week of the bipartisanship that the town is supposed to work on just eroding, that's the only reason that I think the public broadcast conversations and the rescissions package is a little bit more than just like one in a string of bad stories. But I think the way David puts it, relative, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot happening.
So here's where I think it is a bigger deal in the greater scheme of things, only in that it is part of the authoritarian march. It's part of the checklist of things that authoritarians do to try to undermine democracy. Culture and media are very important. From day one, Donald Trump has been attacking the media as the enemy of the people, which is something that Hitler and Mussolini did back in their day. Because they know that the media is supposed to be the public's main pipeline of information for an informed citizenry. And you have to have, for a democracy to be successful, particularly a representative constitutional democracy like ours, you need an informed citizenry. And you need trusted sources of receiving that information. If you start to undercut that and then no one knows who to believe what or where, it's much more easier to manipulate folks and to use propaganda to indoctrinate people with lies and things that aren't true. And then that turns into certain behavior. And then you tolerate certain things that you may not have tolerated before. Because if you are ignorant about why it matters or the source of it or what the outcomes could potentially be of what they're doing, then you go along with it. Oh, that sounds great. Okay, we'll do that. But not really realizing that what you're doing is actually stripping away your own agency in a democracy. We're seeing this happen every single day. And so in this instance, it started off with mainstream media corporations like ABC, now CBS, bending the knee to Donald Trump with those frivolous lawsuits and them saying, okay, we'll settle. Now, that was a terrible precedent to set. Now, this whole idea that I remember when I was a young Republican in the 90s, Republicans have had a bee in their bonnet for PBS and NPR for 50 years, okay? And it's mainly been a cultural issue. They think that this is liberal bias. They're indoctrinating the kids. It's too woke. It's whatever. For years and years and years, they've argued about this, about Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and all of that. I think there was an FBI file on Mr. Rogers or something. It was nuts. So this has been going on for a long time, but the undercurrent of it now, for this to finally happen now, this is part of the fever dream of the most radical left-wing culture warriors on the right, that they finally get to do this. This is in the Project 2025 1,000-page manifesto. They're checking everything off. So this is another way of going after culture and the way PBS is more than just PBS NewsHour. It's Sesame Street. It's great performances. It's you have your local PBS stations that show like college, high school championships and, maybe local events that are going on in your town. There's a lot that goes on there that's more localized for people. But the Republicans have been great at nationalizing issues like this and taking maybe one example of something that might have been offensive in the arts or whatever and going, oh, that's it. The whole thing is terrible. So I'm worried about this is another example of how they've gone after media, culture, and ways that people ingest information from trusted sources and taking that away also and corrupting and perverting it as somehow it's good for you and that what they were doing was anti-American and that there was some kind of bias. That you can't paint a broad brush with everything like that all the time, but that's what they're doing. And now we're living through that again.
Well, let me just say, I would much rather Congress defund NPR than Trump run NPR.
I guess, yeah.
I would much rather have NPR be a fully private entity possessing its own independent First Amendment rights and be able to exercise its rights fully free of federal control than what we're seeing now, which is Trump is taking every dollar that exists that goes into any private organization and is trying to use that as a leverage point to essentially control the organization from the ground up.
But David, he's doing that anyway. He's controlling CBS, ABC, and some of these others by bribing them, and you know what I'm saying, making them
big difference between ABC, NBC, CBS, who have billions of dollars voluntarily capitulating, which that's on them.
Trump could still squeeze private organizations, is my point.
It is on them, but who does become the new NPR? They become part of big private media.
That's right.
With all, I like Sesame Street or whatever as much as the next guy, but it's the democracy point. It's sort of like Voice of America, but for us, especially with the silo problem that we have in the country, something happens. You just want to, it's semi-straight. That's what NPR is for so many people. And now we're just at the mercy of the hubbub and jungle of big media and who knows where they are.
I don't want us to risk falling into the trap of the way that this is being just wholly nationalized, because you heard senators make this point too, right? It's why some of them were sticky on supporting this. Like, they have local radio stations that are going to struggle with their funding that are related to this central hub. And the central hub, thankfully, should be okay because they have other funding mechanisms. That is not me saying that I support this funding being cut. That's also not my role here. I just think it's important to think about the trickle-down effects, as is the case with every other piece of legislation that Congress has passed here. On its face, you could make an argument for it, but the trickle-down could be pretty detrimental in some of these states.
All politics is local.
I agree. And I think we can also agree that full-on assault on the Constitution is worse.
Yeah.
Maybe a billionaire will come and do it, right? There's plenty of billionaires out there that have enough money that could make up for it. So maybe we'll see that to the private sector, right?
Well, I can name 2 billionaires. When I was at the Washington Post, you say our billionaire's better than there, and then I went to their billionaire. LA Times, Washington Post, there are 2 billionaires. We know how that's working out. All right, we got 30 seconds left for our final feature, and we're going to talk a little bit more about NPR, because the question is, where does Big Bird go from here? What's going to be the new Sesame Street in our new non-NPR world? 5 words or fewer, anyone?
Big Bird gets a podcast. Everyone has
That's
one
a good
now.
one. That's a good one.
Moves to Canada, trolls Trump.
That's really okay.
Mine's a little more grim. Job or Buffalo Wild Wings?
There you go. And I'm going with the full-on antithesis. Breitbart's commie tales with animals. Thank you very much to Ali, David, and Theyre for another great conversation, and hope to see you all soon on Talking Feds. Thank you so much to David, Theyre, and Ali, and thank you very much, listeners, for tuning in to Talking Feds. If you like what you've heard, please tell a friend to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever they get their podcasts, and please take a moment to rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, where we are posting full episodes and daily updates on top legal stories. Check us out on Substack, harrylitman.substack.com, where we're posting 2 or 3 bulletins a week breaking down the various threats to constitutional norms and the rule of law. And Talking Feds has joined forces with The Contrarian. I'm a founding contributor to this new media venture, committed to reviving the diversity of opinion that feels increasingly rare in today's news landscape, where legacy media seems to be tacking toward Trump for business reasons rather than editorial ones. Rest assured, we're still the same scrappy, independent podcast you've come to know and trust, just now linked up with an ambitious and vital project designed for this pivotal moment in our nation's legal and political discourse. Find out more at contrarian.substack.com. Thanks for tuning in, and don't worry, as long as you need answers, the feds will keep talking. Talking Feds is produced by Catherine Devine. Our associate producers are Luke Cregan, Becca Havian, and Katie Upshaw. Sound engineering by Matt McArdle. Rosie Don Griffin, David Lieberman, Hamza Mahadranathan, Emma Maynard, and Hallie Necker are our contributing writers. and production assistance by Akshaj Turbailu and Sebastian Navarro. Our music, as ever, is by the amazing Philip Glass. Talking Fez is a production of Delito LLC. I'm Harry Littman. Talk to you later.